ElectraCast.
The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
Hello, Nigel here. I couldn't help noticing that you're still awake. Now, I'm an owl. I'm supposed to be up at night, but you need your sleep. So if it's your allergy symptoms that are keeping you up, here's a word to the wise. Try Zysol. You see, Zysol works fast to relieve sneezing, runny nose, itchy watery eyes, and itchy nose and throat. And it keeps going strong for 24 hours, so you can get your sleep and wake up refreshed and ready for a productive day ahead. Be wise, all. Take Zysol at night. Use as directed. Starts working in 45 minutes.
Hi, welcome to Brain Arcade. This is Chris Cross, your host. And today I have a good friend of mine, Mark Netter, who I've known for years. And he actually, are you the owner of ElectraCast? Or is this
co-founder and co-owner with Peter Rafelson, my partner, who comes from a Hollywood family that goes all the way back to the very first sound movie. His great uncle wrote the script for The Jazz Singer.
Oh, wow. That's wild.
And his
That's
father,
wild.
Yeah, and his father was this great director, producer, Bob Rafelson, who made a bunch of movies with Jack Nicholson, produced Easy Rider. Okay. Great.
Oh, that's fun. Actually, LA is a fun town for that type of thing. Like you'll run into somebody and you'll have coffee with them and you're like, oh yeah, my mom wrote Betty Davis Eyes or something. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't mind, take a couple minutes to tell us about your background. The topic today is going to be about the zeitgeist going on in entertainment and games and the noticeable shifts that we're seeing. So basically, you and I are going to talk about what's happening right now and hopefully come up with how do we win?
I hope so.
Or how do we get to the next step before everybody else? Right.
Well, I'm originally from upstate New York, so I'm not a Hollywood guy. My partner, as I mentioned, is, and he actually is a big music producer, writer as well. But I went to film school at NYU in New York. I came out here. I worked on features. I had been a music supervisor on Olympic broadcasts, so I've got this varied background. And I got into the games business after working on some features in LA, and I was brought up to San Francisco by Jordan Mechner, creator of Prince of Persia. I produced the game The Last Express. I stayed on, worked with Hank Rogers on Tetris for a bit, came back to LA and got into entertainment advertising, which I spent about 20 years doing. During that period, I made my own feature film called Nightmare Code. First feature film told entirely from the point of view of an artificial intelligence, came out 10 years ago. And, basically was working in entertainment advertising with clients, including all the major movie studios, the major broadcast networks, some tech companies like Intel and Adobe, some cable companies, some game companies, using some of my game contacts. And now I teach at the Los Angeles Film School. I teach entertainment advertising and related subjects. And I also, a few years ago, started ElectraCast, our podcast company, with Peter Rafelson. And we now distribute over 100 independently produced podcasts, also including about 5 of our own, one of which I'd love to plug here, which is Film Generations, where myself and my partner on the show, David Tauzik, introduce a classic movie to a panel of about 2 to 4 young people and see, does that movie from 1939 still play in 2025?
Oh, that's super fun. Do you do it as a live showing? Do you give people homework and they come back?
The way that we do it is everybody gets a little assignment. They have to watch the movie, usually at home. And the way people watch movies today, it might be on their computer, might even be on their phone. Mm-hmm. Hopefully it's on a big TV. Occasionally they get to go out to see it in one of the rep houses here in LA. And then everybody gets a little piece of research to do. One person will research the making of the movie. One will research the reception. One will research the times when the movie came out. So if the movie came out during the Depression, talk about the Depression, or during the Vietnam War, talk about what was happening on campuses or in Vietnam. And my partner, David, on the show, he does the director's bio. So he'll always talk about the director. So far, we haven't duplicated any directors. Mm-hmm. Then at the end, everybody gets a chance to rate the movie. We have a 4-star system, and they get to decide whether or not they would share that movie with any of their friends and which friends, which gets very funny when we deal with movies like Psycho and Blue Velvet. And right. Start to hear words like normies.
Right. Well, let me know when you get to like Japanese samurai films of the 70s and 80s, and then I'll jump in on some of that stuff.
I'm dying to do Seven Samurai, which is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to Kurosawa yet.
Oh, yeah. I was going for the more pulpy stuff, like the Shintaro Katsu stuff, or like Hanzo the Razor, or like Zatoichi, or
Takeshi Miike or something, or yeah,
exactly. Those are fun. So this is part of why I wanted to talk to you about Zeitgeist, and I think first let's define that for everybody. Of Zeitgeist being
it's usually the defining spirit of the time, right?
Right. Yeah, the collective mind space of the audience, right? Of like, where we are. And like, I've always paid attention to it from a game design POV because you need to be able to tell the future. What's going to be hot in 2 years, or what's going to be relevant about what I'm making 24 months from now, or, not just adding on to the last layer, but how do I actually get ahead of it a little bit? And so I feel connected to it in a way that I think you probably do too.
Well, I would say a couple of things about that. I was actually talking to my students about this last night in a class on entertainment marketing, and about how if you can capture the zeitgeist, it does a lot of the marketing for you. But, with a feature film, you're lucky if it's 3 years between conception to release. You say 24 months for a game. There are games that, how long does Grand Theft Auto take?
Oh, well, Grand Theft Auto 6 been in production probably for, I don't know if they've actually been in production since 5 shipped, but that's about a decade, right? So
you're talking about like 6 years, maybe 8 years.
Well, Mario 64 from head scratch to shelves was 5 years.
Right. And there's a lot of films that take, like Forrest Gump took 10 years to get made.
Right.
So artists really need to be like future forecasters. They got to be able to predict things. They got to be able to look ahead. We might look at our situation right now. We know who's president. We know what's happening with the stock market. We know what's going on. But let's say you have a movie that might be released in 2028. What's the feeling going to be that year?
Sure. And also you see this sometimes where you're like, wow, read the room. This movie came out and it's just not appropriate for the times. And that can happen too, right? And so where are we right now?
Great question.
What can we infer from what's happening in games? And so there's a couple things that I want to set up first, which is I think the actual zeitgeist right now is going to be hard for you and I to tackle, because we're seeing, the early 2000s was the years of aggregation and like mega social communities. And it became extremely, I wouldn't say easy, but it was easier to sort of see where the zeitgeist is, or what was resonating, not just with certain like marketing cohorts, but what was happening to an audience as a whole. But where we're at right now is a little bit more tribal. People are discussing things in smaller, with a tighter focus, but we are seeing things like the movie that won Best Oscar this year, or best picture, right? Or is
lowest grossing film in the history of the Oscars.
Lowest grossing film, total indie, out of left field. And so
by the way, we don't know what it's grossed on pay-per-view yet.
Right.
And those numbers may never get released, because that tends to be, unless somebody wants to release it. But with regular box office, we know. So you hit on a really big point. Monoculture is all but dead.
Yeah.
The idea of even a zeitgeist show like Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones, what we used to call the shows that we all agree are great. The only one that I see right now is Severance, and I'm not even sure that many people have Apple TV Plus.
Yeah.
But you can see how it's kind of taken over Reddit, and it's become like taking over talk shows and things like that. But it's very rare. So the first thing I'd say about the zeitgeist, and I want to say, I'm talking entertainment in general. I'm not as much of an expert on games as you are. I still have a toehold in that community.
Sure.
The number one thing I would say is fear. People are really scared in Hollywood that, thanks to COVID and the strikes and consolidation and the end of peak TV, where people were making more shows than any of us could have watched, that there's not even really a pilot season anymore where all the actors in town get a chance to at least be in a pilot, even if it's not picked up for series. That's all become very fragmented. So there's a lot of fear, especially in Hollywood, that the business as it used to exist just isn't anymore. The flip side of that, I think, is the tools are democratizing across the board. And you and I have talked about this separately, about how in games, indie games can pop up, and because you don't necessarily spend the money you would spend on a AAA title, you can make your money back with a minor hit of some sort. Whereas you hit that niche audience really hard. And there's big questions about how AI is going to affect everything. The studios have certain rules they have to adhere to because of their deals with the unions. But it's where the independents come in, right? And there was just an independent studio just said they're going to do 30 AI created movies shortly.
Oh, really?
So
they're just announcing we're going to do 30 of these.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the name of the company on the tip of my tongue, but it just came out literally yesterday, and that's part of what's going on right now. So I think there's a lot of fear, and I think for younger people and for people that maybe are older but are adept and particularly know how to use technology, there is a lot of opportunity. It just the scale is maybe different, and the breakout hits may be harder to come by.
Sure. And I would agree with that. I mean, it's going to be like the closest thing that I can compare it to is the rise of YouTube, right? In that the barrier of entry became so low that, we got lots of very personal content or unstructured content. And then people started to do really interesting things with it because they were free from the structures that were traditional TV or filmmaking structures, right? But then later on, it matured and we got stuff like Cobra Kai, right?
Yeah, and I think the other question is, I don't know if you've seen Sean Baker, the director of Anora, in some of his speeches on the awards he's been winning, but he's saying like he's making indie films. He's indie for life. He's not doing it as a calling card. A lot of people create an indie film and then they become a Marvel director. And then you kind of wonder what it is you liked about them in the first place since their voice seems to be gone. But there is that sense that the big companies are really, Hollywood has always been good about exploiting things that have become successful in other areas. Before the sound era, it was books, right? Count of Monte Cristo, Wizard of Oz. There are silent versions of these movies. Then sound comes in and they're buying Broadway plays. So those plays have already been successful on Broadway. Now they're bringing them to a larger audience. Same thing with Marvel Comics and superheroes, right? Once the technology got good enough that you could do special effects that could match what Jack Kirby could draw, then you get, this whole new sequence that started with Iron Man and all that. What's interesting to me is Mr. Beast, who I heard about from my younger son back when he was like 16. He's 21 now. He was telling me how great Mr. Beast was and how awesome he was on YouTube and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah. Well, now he's got an Amazon series. Right. And it did well.
Oh, did it do well? I have no interest in it, but
I have no interest in it either, but
that's fine. It's just like the thing is like Hollywood. I don't know that I can say the same for games. Not in the same way as Hollywood, but like the organism adapts and changes to what's around it, and it will always filter out what's going to make the most money, or like it will follow. It'll follow the numbers, right? And it almost runs itself. I think Hollywood could be run with an AI.
Do you think that? I mean, you introduced me to Plants vs. Zombies years ago, right?
Yeah.
Was that, and I, excuse my ignorance, was that ever picked up by a major game studio or a game publisher?
Okay, so Plants vs. Zombies is made by a game company called PopCap in Seattle.
Okay.
So the story, it's funny to me because I think it's a pattern that you see in games and also in entertainment in general. They did really well. They had Peggle, Plants vs. Zombies. They made a lot of really cool, highly polished, indie games, and they went to the markets they could feed really well. Like they had a Mac version very early on before they even went mobile. And then EA bought PopCap and then destroyed it. Like first, let's just say this. Like, first of all, everybody making games, of course they want to make money, but it's how they approach making that money that is the difference between being an indie and then getting bought by a shareholder run company. And so there's nothing wrong with EA. EA did what they do. They buy IP in companies. They milk it for all they can until they did like 6 or 7 games that were all Plants vs. Zombies themed that all did relatively well, but they squeeze it really hard for revenue. And then I'd be surprised if we see another PopCap, or sorry, not PopCap, but Plants vs. Zombies game ever.
Right. 10 years, someone will come up with one.
It's possible. In the early days, it was impossible for them to spread their IP around because of the way that they wrote contracts back in those days as a publisher. So, well, maybe.
It's funny. One of the things that you just talked about, like everybody wants to make money and that's good. But it also depends, kind of how you're going about it. The way that we define it in marketing is put together a marketing plan. You'll have a marketing objective. We want to sell 10,000 units, 100,000 units, 1 million units. We want 5% market share, whatever it is. Those are marketing objectives. But you also have a mission statement. Most companies have
Yep.
a mission statement, and that's the more aspirational thing that you want to do. And usually it doesn't really mention numbers. What it talks about is who's the market that you're serving and what are you providing that they need. With ElectraCast, our mission statement is to create community and amplify diverse voices through compelling entertainment and story. So any decision we make, including podcasts we create ourselves or bring on, or even the graphic designers we bring on and the things that we create for our social media, are all around the idea of we want diversity. So if you were to look at our Instagram, it really doesn't look cookie cutter. You'll always see it looks professional. There's always our logo in the lower left corner, but a huge variety of art styles.
Right.
So that's our North Star. I wonder if a game company has a certain mission, like, we want to create the best role-playing games ever. I mean, Blizzard Entertainment's mission statement, and I'm going to paraphrase, I don't have it exactly, is to create the most epic entertainment experiences ever. It doesn't even mention the word game.
Yes, that's right. And in fact, having started there in the early days, a lot of the things that they did well were, so for instance, when building all the Warcraft games, they were like, we want everything to look like toys.
Wow.
We want this to look like a play set. Right. And so that's why they have that kind of shiny sheen 3D look was totally acceptable. It wasn't trying to go for realism, but then it evolved over time. People moved on and things changed. But that, by the time you get to Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3, it was very like, we want this to feel like you're playing with action figures.
So cool.
Right. And so that's not a game thing, but it is a play thing. So and I guess you hit upon what I'm kind of implying is that at the larger shareholder-run companies, a lot of times that North Star is make the shareholders happy, or basically our what's our stock price, and that can be felt, and which is an interesting topic to talk about in relation to Zeitgeist. In that, when you make a thing, people can feel the creativity or the art that you're putting into it, and what the emotions that you're putting into the touch of the thing. And then when it goes to a team of 2,000, it's hard to feel anything. Like it could be technically really good, but it becomes, a very polished process.
I'll give you a great example at the highest level. I'm talking big budget, huge budget movies.
Sure.
Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
So you see a Christopher Nolan movie, and first of all, it's going to be worth the money you spent to go there. You may like the movie more or less than others. There's some movies of his I love, others I don't like as much, right?
Yep.
But what you know is that there's going to be a person behind it, an intelligence behind it. He's going to take you on the journey. You can trust him. You can trust his team. And when you talk to people who have worked with him, they say his wife is his producer. Mm-hmm. There's no cell phones on set. He doesn't own a cell phone, right? He moves very quickly. Everybody is really prepared coming in there. And they say it's almost like being on a student film, except he's spending $150 million, $200 million.
Right. Yeah, he's taken what he does and pumped it, and basically has earned the right to do things his way.
Yeah.
So back to that feel and why it's important in games, and I think you can feel this in all art and all media, is that like when the creators, Christopher Nolan, for example. I had a meeting with him once. You and I'll trade notes with you sometime.
I'd love to hear that.
In relation to Zeitgeist, let's take Christopher Nolan for a second. Mm-hmm. He has an interesting finger on the pulse in the fact that, like, I would have not thought that a World War I based movie would have been relevant. Was it? No, the World War I one where previous to.
You thinking of Dunkirk?
No, not Dunkirk. I'm thinking. Oh, sorry, he didn't do 1917, did he? He did.
No, that was Sam Mendes in 1917.
Sam Mendes, but even Sam Mendes picking that, but also any of those topics, and it's interesting how relevant they are today, right? And like they're touching something under the surface, which is what I kind of want to dig into before we sort of finish up our talk. Is like there is this surface level appeal that we're trying to hit psychologically with viewers or players that is actually more about humanity and about the touching people at a level that's not about the sort of current events or pop culture, right? So what do you think about that as a statement? I'll tell you from a design side afterwards, like what that means
Well, it's
to me.
funny. I feel like in some sense you're talking a little bit about marketing. And in another sense, you're talking about what happens when people actually start getting their hands on something and tell their friends about it.
Kind of, yeah, there's a little bit. So here, let me frame it a little bit differently. So the popularity of Pac-Man has almost nothing to do with the art. The art supports it. But the popularity of Pac-Man is because it hits you in your lizard brain.
Yeah.
It's fight, feed, and fornicate.
Yeah, no, it's
like
100%
the 4 F's
reptile.
of your id. It's 100% reptile brain with a smattering of social leaderboards, a little bit of like off-screen social, right? I've got next. Like there are sort of psychological factors around it. But the thing that's interesting about Pac-Man, and especially Ms. Pac-Man, once you put a bow on the knockoff that they just bought, is that the female audience attached to it. That's right. In the early days when it was thought to be more of a male centric sort of game audience, but the appeal, there's nobody that plays it that's going to tell you it's amazing because it hits my lizard brain. They will just like attach to it because it appeals to them in a more visceral kind of a way.
It's funny. The one that I'm thinking about is the new Monster Hunter game that just came out, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Monster Hunter Wild. Right. It's like the big benefit of that game is you get to fight these big monsters. You get to kill huge monsters. But what's funny, I kind of make a separation between something like that, which is pure lizard brain, fight or flight. Yep. Right. And fun. Oh, nothing against it. Think about like the games that resonate more. Maybe they don't make as much money, but I think Shadow of the Colossus did pretty well. But Shadow of the Colossus was so fascinating to me because you're killing these huge monster statues come to life, right? That are Colossuses from another era. And it's incredibly hard to kill them. You're riding on top of them. I couldn't even finish the game. I'm not that good a gamer, and it was really, really hard. But every time you kill one, you feel bad.
Right. Yes, that's right. That's right. I always felt like whatever,
I'm not
like
worthy.
Like basically, I'm destroying the world in a small way, and that's intentional.
Yeah.
What's interesting? You brought up Monster Hunter, and that's a more modern example. So that does actually have Pac-Man in the archaeology in the core sample of that game, and the fact that almost all games have that fight or flight thing at the reflex layer. But what's interesting about Monster Hunter is it now also has all of these social functions built in, right? And so this is where I think I'm getting to the idea that our zeitgeist is fractured because people are getting into these smaller communities that are walled off. And so
it's like Twitch world. Like basically, Twitch has become the place, if you're a gamer, that's where you're going to go to find out about stuff. You're going to watch other people play. You may accidentally see other content that's non-gaming and get involved with that. But it's, the guy who predicted all this back in the 1960s was Marshall McLuhan, the Canadian academic media philosopher, who basically said that we would retribalize, that radio was a nationalist medium. TV becomes more of a fractional tribalist medium, that we were, the difference between railroads and airplanes is the difference between having to have linear connections and being able to randomly drop anywhere, random access.
Sure.
And I mean, we've retribalized like crazy. Now the question is there opportunities within that retribalization to capture huge groups of tribes or huge groups of people with something like Taylor Swift, for example, with something like Grand Theft Auto?
Sure. And I think the answer is still yes. I think there will always still be those big titles. But the thing that I'll pose back to you is, as a creator, do I actually want to design something for the huge? Do you sort of where I'm going with this? Is like, basically the thought process of like, and I'm going through this right now personally. Which is like, I'm deprogramming the idea that everything I design has to sell 10 million units. Because that actually, I'm going to use the word enforces a certain amount of design, because it sets up such restrictions around the things that you're attempting to do and how you communicate them and what you're saying to the players, that it changes things up. And so like in the new like art space that I want to be in, I'm starting to realize that maybe I don't want to build it for 10 million people and go huge. Like maybe I'm actually okay with staying tribal or building a tribe for myself, right?
I think it's a great question. I mean, look, I think the dream that most of us who love pop culture and grew up with pop culture, especially people like me, grew up in the 60s, 70s, even 80s.
Yeah.
The dream is always, I did it my way. I somehow became the Rolling Stones, didn't ever have to compromise, always was finding new ground, but staying true to myself, and everybody else came along because it was so fucking good. And then the question in game design, I would wonder, would be, is that going to, the person who is able to, if that's even possible, is the person who's able to do that a very young designer who's just super plugged in, right generation, knows what's going on, or an older designer, someone maybe more like your age or even older, who has such a wealth of experience and finds a way to focus it in such a way that they can actually create something that is true to themselves, yet still has all the bells and whistles and things that attract a huge audience.
Yeah, which is build it and they will come is no longer a potential strategy based on what we've just said about Zeitgeist and trying to be able to put your finger on the pulse. Like, it still could work, but the amount of energy you have to put in to build it and they will come, especially in the current marketing space, is extremely hard. It's very expensive.
Okay.
And takes a lot of...
Let me flip that around on you and use something that comes out of the startup world, right?
Yeah.
So in the startup world, all the talk for the past few years is about product market fit.
Uh-huh.
So the idea is, as opposed to like, I've got this incredible idea for this awesome new service and it's going to be amazing. We've got to build the whole thing from the ground up and release it all at once. 1.0 is going to be like a 5.0. It's going to be awesome, right?
Right.
Come up with one particular thing that your product does, one little thing that it solves, whatever it might be. Think about Instagram just posting photos, right? Back when it started, before the ads, before the video, before the reels, when it was fun. Well, I guess it still is fun, but it was really great just to have this like photo gallery. And the algorithm was everything came in the order that it came in. It wasn't feeding you.
It was better than Facebook.
It was, well, that's why Facebook bought it, right?
Yeah. Right.
So that was product market fit. And the idea is that you put out something that's just a piece of what you ultimately want to do, but you see if it works. And if it does, you build on it. And if it doesn't, you scrap it and you do something different.
Right.
Can you do, are people, and you'll know this better than me, are people in the game space doing that kind of product market fit thing where they start off with something small and then it can turn into a AAA title 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line?
Kind of. So not the mega hits, but the Balatros of the world. Have you played Balatro yet? It's like a card game. It's hyper viral. And Balatro, Vampire Survivors, and there's another one. Oh, Cult of the Lamb. So those 3 games, they actually did a different pattern. They built the community in flight, right?
Oh, wow.
By being very open with their design early on. And so the AAA part that you're talking about growing it is that now they have an IP. So the next one they do can be bigger, better, stronger, faster, etc., because they already have a community built around it. But each one of those games, when they actually did release, went super viral. So
I'm assuming that they would release little artwork along the way,
artwork, some gameplay. They did early access, let people play it early, took feedback from the community,
made adjustments,
made people feel like they were heard, very open with what they were doing. People felt like they were along for the ride, not, like big corporate style community building where they just announce stuff.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question about this, because I don't know anything about these games, but it sounds totally great to me and very cool. Did they have any kind of name recognition or any hook when they started? What was it that got people to even look at them at the beginning?
Not really. I don't know the story behind Cult of the Lamb, but it's a small indie team. But the guy who did Balatro and the guy who did Vampire Survivors, notice that I'm saying a singular person made both of those games, like one for each, like 2 different guys.
Wow.
One guy started Vampire Survivors. He was working on casino games. And what's really addictive about Vampire Survivors is he brought in some of these slot machine mechanics.
Love it.
It's super rewarding. Like the endorphin rhythm, all of that is super rewarding. And so like the feel of that game is right. Now, is it the best art in the world? Absolutely not. But it doesn't matter because it just feels good.
Well, that's all the difference. Yeah. I mean, this is what Jordan Mechner taught me about gameplay back in the day, right?
Yeah.
He said in a movie, you see John McClane do something in Die Hard, and you think like, you kind of feel through him, you identify. In the game, it's you're making the choices. And how you architect those choices, making people feel like they have unlimited choices when they don't, but giving them meaningful choices so that at that moment they try something over and over again, like arcade style, can't quite get over the hump. And then when you do, and Jordan literally would like throw his fist in the air and go like, yes.
Right.
And that's the feeling you get. And that's what makes great gameplay.
Those two games are really great examples of capturing that in a bottle. And they both came from people that weren't trying to go there. They were just trying to make something really fun. Like, actually, the guy who made Bellatra was just trying to make something for his friends.
So, like, these are people again, go back to Marshall McLuhan. He said, we used to have the days where people would come from other fields and do things. Now we have fans that become the professionals.
Right. And from a game design perspective, and this is where I gave up on having a really strong desire I gave this up years ago, which was basically like unified game theory, teaching stuff like that so that everybody can be on the same footing and know all the arcane secrets of like game designers from like the past decades. I actually gave up on that because almost everybody can intuitively learn from what they're playing.
Right.
Like they learn certain things just by trial and error and building on their own, etc. Now, is it the most efficient? No. Is it the most informed? No. But can it get there? Yes. Mm-hmm. Right? Because games are about your relationship to the player when you design, and it's a conversation. And so if you get good at that conversation, you can then design correctly as long as you have some empathy.
Yeah. In marketing, we call it a niche competitive advantage. You can have three competitive advantages in marketing. Either you have better features than everybody else, either you have cheaper costs than everybody else for the similar product, or you find a niche that you can. Now, I got a question for you. With these three games, or with any of them, I don't know, maybe not all of them, where did they find their communities? Were they on Twitch? Were they on Kickstarter? Where did they find them?
Two of them, for sure, mostly found the community on Steam, which is incredible because Steam is not a great community tool.
No, it's more of like a download and play, right?
Yeah. There are community features, but it's not really built to be a place to hang out.
It's not a place where you show artwork and say like, I'm going to make this game and it'll be out in a year.
No, it has that, but it's not like there's no sort of viral potential. Like you have to get people to it. Right. And so it's not like you will naturally get discovered on Steam. You can, there are things that work there, but people are, it's really sad. Lots of like indie solo game devs are like, they're spending more time gaming the algorithm of Steam than they are like making awesome game. Right.
Sure.
So they're like, oh, you need to get at least 100 wish lists in a day to do the thing. And like, they're playing the platform like it's a game and not actually, which is appropriate, but it's also very time consuming and also, not necessarily, it's hard to do the test tasting that you're talking about. Like it just feels like, oh, I just didn't get anybody, but you're not getting any feedback on the fact that people passed you by for some reason or another. Okay, so here, let me pivot a little bit. So back to Zeitgeist a little bit. And here's my Steam observation and the segue to coming back to like, well, what are we going to do about it? So before Christmas, and this is for indie games, but I think it's going to apply in some cases to indie media in general. Before Christmas, I went to Steam and I looked at, and I noticed two things. One, I did a search for indie games. It was 100,000 games.
Jeez.
The other thing was I looked at it over time, and it's a hockey stick. So the cadence of release, right? And so like the last 4 or 5 years, it's absolutely skyrocketed how many games are being released because of tool availability. This is without AI. Once AI comes into the mix, it's going to get worse. But between December 1st and January 1st, I went back and looked again, and it was 103,000 games with the indie tag. So 3,000 games came out in 30 days.
Yeah, nobody can play all these games.
There's no way to curate it humanly, like with a human curation. There's also no way for me to find stuff. This brings me to like my other big thesis that I'm working on is that the $1 billion question to solve is how do we address discoverability in all entertainment, right? Especially in games for me, but like discoverability, that's more than just marketing, right? It's like with this tribal environment in the zeitgeist, how are people going to discover stuff and how do you attack that from a Or maybe you don't. Maybe you just build a community around yourself and make lemonade money and be fine with it.
I mean, one side of it is marketing, right? So if you have a lot of money, you do paid media. If you don't have a lot of money, then you have to find other ways to build your community. Maybe you find those few super fans out there. Or you go to influencers and you somehow find your way into the influencers. Can you convince so-and-so who's getting queried about 20 games a day, get them to pay attention to your game for some reason, either because you have a connection or because you happen to have a great pitch. And then the only other thing that I think is somehow you're clever in a way that nobody else is. Like you make that video that one person sees it and they can't help but share it with 10 other people.
Right.
It's guerrilla marketing, which is very hard to do. I used to work in selling like social media services. And the worst thing would be when you'd walk into a client and they go, okay, I want a viral video.
Right.
Be like, well, a lot of things go into a video becoming viral. Now, there are certain things you can do that can make it more likely.
Right.
But if you haven't hit the zeitgeist, you're fucked.
Sure. Or it may not even be hitting the zeitgeist, but hitting the little pockets now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think I see this is an observation. I see a strong desire for authenticity or genuine content. And so, manufacturing.
Which again goes back to influencers as well.
It does. But even influencers are starting to be a little bit, I wouldn't say shady, but they're trying to make money too.
Starting.
Yeah. I think it's being more and more noticeable. Like the biggest thing right now is consumer trust. Like I would say that the zeitgeist right now, the one thing that I can say about everything is I think you're right with fear. And the other one is a lack of trust. Like if I see something that looks like it's corporate schlock, I instantly distrust the source, right?
Let me put in a pitch for podcasting on this one then, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that's really interesting about podcasting is it's your voice, it's authentic, it's a rich media channel, right? If I create a social media post, that's not a super rich channel. It's just a post, right? Maybe you have some video, whatever. Podcast, let's say a half-hour podcast. Let's say I want to create a new game and I want to talk about it as I'm building it for a year and a half. And every week I'm going to give people updates and it's going to point to the website where we put some stuff up there. But, I'll put in X amount of content that you can consume within like 15 minutes or 5 minutes. But the podcast is going to take you a half hour if you want to listen all the way through. You can always speed it up, right? But essentially, it's a great way to show your authenticity. You can even answer questions that come in from the audience. You can bring other people on, but they hear your voice. We have podcasters on ElectraCast. And I mean, you can start a podcast on ElectraCast for $15 a month or $150 a year. And we'll help you monetize too. We'll help you run ads that we'll supply and we'll split the revenue with you 50-50. It's a great deal, right? But we have people that are on ElectraCast who don't expect necessarily even to have a huge audience, but maybe they have a marketing business. And their marketing business, one of the way they get clients is they invite people who are prospective clients to be interviewed on their podcast. And at the end of the recording, the client turns to them and says, we should be working together.
Right.
So there's all these different ways. You can use that podcasting as a way to create that authentic connection just as you can through YouTube. And by the way, YouTube is the number one place people listen to podcasts now, even without video.
Right. Which is wild to me that YouTube is so ubiquitous in its approach to almost whatever. YouTube's a monster.
Well, I'll tell you what that reminds me of. I'm old enough to remember before you had even cable TV.
Yeah.
And
same.
So back when I was growing up, right, prime time started at 7:30 at night, went to 11. And that show at 7:30 had to be so good because people didn't get up off the couch to change the channel. You didn't have a remote. You couldn't hit a button. So if I wanted to change the channel to watch something on a different network, I had to get up off the couch, walk on over to the TV, click, click, click. Oh, it's fuzzy. Let me adjust the rabbit ears,
Right.
So the networks said the lead-in show was so important. Even the news would be important before it, right?
Right.
And so YouTube kind of functions that way now. The first time I heard about this was a few years ago. I had a student who said, oh, yeah, I listen to all my podcasts on YouTube. I go, oh, you mean you watch them? He goes, no. I'll be working and I'll listen to music on YouTube and I'll listen to a podcast on YouTube and I will ever look at the screen. It's just playing in the background. It's his radio. Yeah.
It's the modern version of radio for most people, at least in their homes. Once they get in their cars, it's a little different, but cars are becoming less and less necessary. Okay, we're 2 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up here. So I don't think we got to any real solutions, but I think we have identified a couple of things. Like if you're down for it, I would love to have you come back and we can
Anytime,
sort of
Chris.
tackle some of these things. So fear identified as like a zeitgeist feature right now.
And opportunity, but you have to be willing to be nimble, and you have to be willing to say, go your own way, and be willing to do things cheap enough and nimble enough that you can go niche and build on that.
Right. And then, which brings me to the other one, which is trust and, consumer trust, which actually you're kind of addressing in both of those. I have something to share with you later that's not ready for the wider audience, but,
Secret is safe with me.
Yeah. I have a secret project, and this actually fits right into that. So, okay. Well, thanks for being on Brain Arcade, Mark. And I'm going to try and schedule another time with you to tackle Zeitgeist again. And then I think we should probably dig into some AI.
Oh, no, we definitely should. Listen, Chris, I always enjoy talking with you. You know that. Yeah. I think Brain Arcade is such a perfect name for your show because every time I talk to you, I feel like my brain has been in a pinball machine and it's hit all the bumpers and the lights are lit up and I'm kind of still buzzing afterwards for another half hour. So it's great talking with you. And I really appreciate being a guest.
The best endorsement or the best feeling for me is when anybody, but especially when you do it, comes back to me 2 days later and goes like, hey, I was thinking about that thing. Right. So anyway, thanks a lot, Mark. I will talk to you next time.
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks to your audience.
Brain Arcade is a Princess Hermit production, produced by Kyrene Kim, music and mixing by Jonathan Ontiveros. The podcast is hosted by me, Chris Cross. You can find me and my other endeavors at coffeeacross.com.